Hi, Jenny Clark here with Solvability, talking about the top 5 pricing strategies to win more government contracts. Let's get started. Here's what we're going to cover. Wrap rates and multipliers. These are the math formulas that you need to know. People call them different things. How to make sure you're covering all your costs. Going to define those and show you how it works. How to estimate your fringe, your overhead, and your G&A. Those are called indirect rates. You want to know how that affects your pricing. You also want to be able to how to quickly estimate your total bid. So I've got some cheat sheets for you, and how to verify that your estimate is even in the ballpark. So let's get started. First off, I want you to take out your calculator. Everybody got a phone, right? Open up the app on your phone, this little calculator, and we're going to do some calculations. Let's pretend that you're getting ready to bid, and the labor category you want to bid at, you've looked at the market rates and you've decided that $100,000 a year is pretty much the market rate for that labor category that you want to price, $100,000. Step 2, divide that salary, $100,000, by 2080. So yeah, 100,000, hit the divide button, 2080. 2080 is 52 weeks times 40 hours per week. Next, you want to multiply that by 1.7. And I'm going to explain later how I get 1.7. That is your billing rate per hour. The whole purpose of what we're doing is talking about multipliers and formulas that you need to be able to use. They're going to vary a little bit from how I've set them up. But what I wanted you to do is think about this like when you were back in chemistry class. And I don't know about you, but chemistry, not my favorite. Good at math, but chemistry, I just plain had to memorize the formulas. That was the only way I could get it. And it didn't matter. I got through, I got into whatever I needed to do next. And that's all we're really trying to do is show you what the formulas are so you can do some memorization, so you can have these on your desktop and use them all the time. There are going to be variations of them. Basically, wrap rate, billing rate, and multiplier, people use them interchangeably, although they may not be necessarily interchangeable. I talk about in terms of billing rates because if you're working in the commercial space, people understand the billing rate that your accountant or your lawyer is going to charge you. That's what the customer is going to pay you when you're selling services to the federal government. The pay rate is what you pay the employee. Those two pieces are very important, but there's always going to be a relationship between those. And I call that relationship the multiplier. That's what you need to have is your share to cover your cost and your profit. In my example, I said the pay rate is 1.7 times the billing rate. Let's do another simple version of math. $100,000 a year is around $50 an hour. That times 1.7 gives us a billing rate of 85. Is that what you got a few minutes ago when we were working on that? How do you know if that covers all your cost? That's where we're going to be talking about the 1.7 later. If you win the contract, could you be losing money? This is something you really have to weigh in on and think about it, because if you don't win contracts, you are losing money. It's always a balancing act, part of the game and part of mastering the game of GovCon. I always like to talk to people about how to think about their business as a business, specifically in federal contracting. It's got its own set of rules. And here you can see Mr. Miyagi having a conversation with Daniel in The Karate Kid. This is early in the movie when Daniel is asking for guidance and a little bit disappointed that what Mr. Miyagi gives him is practices, wax on, wax off. And he doesn't really understand it, but he understands, okay, Mr. Miyagi, I asked you for your help and you're saying you're going to give it to me. So whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to do, because I'm not getting beat up at school anymore. I'm looking for something different. So we're just going to keep talking about this. 3 or 4 different ways to do this, and you may want to print this out and put it up on your wall. The pay rate times the multiplier is a billing rate. Hey, this is algebra. You had some of this in 8th grade. You know this. So just write it around different ways, put it in a little spreadsheet that you can see on your desktop, and have easy ways to create the conversions, because that's what I've done here. The billing rate divided by the multiplier is the pay rate. So same thing with the formula, billing rate divided by the pay rate is the multiplier. You can get there any way, as long as you have 2 of the formulas, or the 2 of the variables, you can get the third, right? Doing the math. We've got direct labor, and I just put a 1 because 1 is the way that multipliers are calculated. For every dollar of direct labor, what are your associated costs? In this simple example, I put 30% for fringe. That's for payroll taxes, group leave, group benefits. 5% for overhead. That's the cost of the technical support of your workforce. 17% for G&A or corporate expenses. And that's going to bring you a fully burdened rate of just under 1.6. That fee percent, that's your profit. And you're going to come out with a fully burdened with fee about 1.7. Have you ever been in a meeting and people are tossing around what's your multiplier, what's your rate? Pay attention. Not everybody uses those terms the same. You should always be asking with or without fee, different things like that. So that's why I'm wanting to teach you the language of federal contracting, give you some fluency in it. Mathematically speaking, if I know that the billing rate that the customer kind of whispered in my ear or put it in an email or gave me a hint and I was listening, he said it's $85.29 per hour. I divide it by my multiplier. The most I can pay my employee, cover all my costs and hit that 8% profit, $50 an hour. I could take less profit. I could cut my rates, which is the same thing as taking less profit. The other way to do it is the way that you would take a look and say, I know that I can pay the guy, the woman, $50 an hour. And so I've got to be able to cover 1.7 in fringe, overhead, G&A, and fee. That is $85.29 an hour billing rate. So think about it. All you got to do is change some percentages, change your math. You've got the answer. What are the costs that you must cover? Think about it. You're selling services to the federal government. Those services are employees providing their labor hours, their brain power, all of those things. Sometimes you have to have them have uniforms. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes there's certifications. But think about, in terms of your workforce, what it takes to support them and what it takes to take care of them from a corporate administrative thing. You got to cover their direct labor. That's their paycheck. Their fringe, payroll taxes, leave, and group benefits. Their overhead, support costs, certification, recruitment, G&A or corporate expense, and profit. What are the components of that labor buildup? Direct labor is going to be their hourly pay rate. Most of the time, you take their annual salary and convert it to an hourly pay rate. Your fringe rate is always a percentage of that labor. Every time you hire a person, you're committing so much in payroll taxes, so much in vacation, sick, holiday, PTO, annual leave, whatever you call it, so much in overhead, which is the cost to onboard them and retain them as qualified and make sure they've got the credentials, make sure they've got the training. The G&A percentage is on top of everything, and fee is typically on top of everything. These are some formulas you need to be thinking about and learning, and there are variations on this. Oh, let's stop for a minute, take a poll. How many of you have been doing government contracting for a while? And how many of you just got started? I'm really just looking for, in our poll results, what your experience level is so I can make sure I'm answering your questions correctly. So let's just say this presentation is designed for companies that have been around for a while, know the basics of government contracts, have got some subcontracts, but what they're really looking for is, okay, I got that. Now I need to be able to use really important tools to up my game. I want to be one of the top federal contractors. I've got ambition, and this is what I'm looking for. So we talked about some math, and now what we're talking about is just, I want to put in your head that it's not just the math. Many times it's not even what your actual costs are right now. It's where your cost will be as your company reaches scale, as you're investing in infrastructure, as you're getting past the point where the executives are having to do all the work and they're actually bringing in professional staff because you have the revenue and you can afford them now. So here's my top 5 strategies to win more government contracts. It's not really the formula. The 5 are: decide your path and stick to it. It's the zigzagging that takes so long. It doesn't mean you can't pivot, but try to set yourself some direction. Don't play someone else's game. I swear, every time I turn around, I'm reading a new book or listening to a new podcast, getting myself off track. Also, I'm asking people, what do they think? Instead of saying, what do I think? Where do I think I want to go? How do I set my strategy? Move real opportunities through your pipeline. Breaks my heart when I'm on the phone with somebody that asks me for help with pricing, and then I ask them about their pipeline, and maybe they send it to me, maybe they don't. But when I see one that just lists that they're searching on all their NAICS codes, and they're creating lists that includes Department of Interior and Department of Commerce and the DOD, that Army, all of these different things on the same pipeline, that is not focused enough. Those are not real opportunities through your pipeline. You're not focused enough. And that's what we mean by real opportunities. I'm really going to give you some important things on that in just a minute. Beware the roller coaster like this. You win a contract. Yay! Oh my gosh, now we got to onboard those people. Crunch, 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 crunch. I brought them all on board. They're all happy. They're all settled. Got the first bill out, took care of the first couple of payrolls. We're finally getting paid on that. Woo! You're back in the grind, though. You got to win the next contract. You also need to know when those contract modifications run out, when a task order is up. Are you being able to cover those same people when something ends? The roller coaster that most companies run into in federal contracting is win, 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 win. We had no control over sequestration. What, COVID? We've got so many things we can't control. It does take discipline, practice to be able to come up with how to beware the roller coaster and get to where you're sustainable. Number 5, this is very important. Growth takes cash, and you can only grow cash with profit. Many people talk about organic growth. Well, organic growth is the same thing with organic cash. Yes, cash can grow on trees, but it's not without a lot of nurturing. You need to learn how to do that. Now, you will always turn to bank line of credit when you qualify. You can get financing through accounts receivable financing. You can get different ways, but let me just say this. When you go to a bank and you say, I'm a federal contractor, and you say, I've got this contract, we just won it, and I'd like to establish a line of credit. If you're not talking to the right banker, they're not going to get it, not going to be able to help you. Cash and profit go hand in hand, because just like at your home, when you've done it, you spent too much at Christmas and you're suffering through January and February, and you're just saying, it'll be fine. We'll get through this. We always do. That is the case in government contracting too. It's got its own cycles. It's always rush, rush, rush when you hit August and September, getting a lot of the work coming in. October, November, you're onboarding the work that you got. November through December, through most of January, you can't even reach your government customers because of holidays and training and all kinds of things that are going on. You don't really come back alive until after the holidays in February. March is where you start to make money again. And it's like March, April, May, June, July, and we're repeating the season again. So think about how you're going to make sure that you're making profit. And man, that's the hardest part about it, because all of these percentages, any one of those percentages that you miss just chewed out your profit. When I say decide your path and stick to it, I mean seriously put on your thinking cap. Tell yourself what you want and why you're going after this. Work-life balance is entrepreneurs. Somehow we we get to where we're so excited about what we're doing that we forget the other part of our lives. And I know that I'm standing here as somebody that is single now and really have had some issues with that because I just get more excited about work than I do about life. And I don't know about you, but there's times where I work a little bit too much. So work-life balance, if it's important to you, you need to set the standards for what you're going to be doing and how you're going to be doing it so that you receive your life as well as the joy of working in the field that you've chosen. Number two, do you know the failure rate for small businesses in the first 5 years is 50%? Well, it's hard to define failure. You know, for me, I started my company in 97 and my backup plan, my exit strategy was, well, if this doesn't work, I'll always go get a job. Luckily, I never had to do that, but failure rate doesn't mean that you lost everything, that you desperately failed. It really means that you weren't really sure if you were all in or not. And I really don't like the analogy of let's burn the boats, but just think about what you're willing to risk, what your timeline is. The next thing is a lot of people don't realize that there's plenty of money in subcontracting. That may be easier. That may require less of a heavy lift to support. And after you get to that point, you might go to invest in prime contracting, but that's going to be more rules, more infrastructure, managing subs, being able to do the contract flow outs, taking control over the proposal process. And number 7, I want you to think about is exit strategy. Get serious about exit strategy. I was just looking at the Inc. 5000. I looked at the city of Huntsville, Alabama, where I was spent 30 something years. And I was able to pick off the Inc. 5000 list, which of those 31 or so companies were federal contractors. Well, 23 of them were federal contractors. To get to the Inc. 5000, which to me is like, oh my gosh, I would love to be on the Inc. 5000. That would be my dream because that would mean that I have an external measure. This is like Jenny getting straight A's because it seems like I was always at 3.8 or something. Anyway, the exit strategy, if you're on the Inc. 5000, that proves that you're sustainable and that it's all working. Those companies took on average at least 10 years to get there. Now, some of them have been on there for several years, so maybe my average isn't right, but I was very amazed when I did the analysis. So your exit strategy, if your plan is to develop a gadget and sell it to Raytheon, that's going to be a different methodology than what I'm talking about because you're going to have to be much more escalated, have a lot more money, have a lot more partners. So just decide your path and stick to it. Next one is don't play someone else's game. I love the movie Moneyball and I love it. Well, Brad Pitt, sure. I love Moneyball because he changed the game of baseball. The Oakland A's basically said, man, we don't have the money to play this kind of team. And he's here on the left-hand side in the meeting with the old guys, the guys that usually sit around and talk about everything. And, they're all about, I'm going to present this player and I want to have my player approved. And then I'm going to feel good because my stats rise and nobody's going to be able to judge me until this time next year. And all I have to say this time next year is, well, he had a bad year. He had that injury, remember? What they did to change the game is they got a finance geek. And what he said is, we should look at the stats. We can create a model to figure this out. We're going to do some research. And this is what I want to talk to you about is do some research, ask for help, trust your gut, choose your own way, but figure out what it's going to take for you to get on base. Don't go for the home runs because getting on base consistently in a consistent plan to me is the measure of the companies that I see on Inc. 5000 or federal. Move real opportunities through your pipeline. I was talking about focus. Don't make this a game of dice. Don't make it dartboards. You're spending a lot of money to go after opportunities. You could choose anywhere on that dartboard to go. Find out what your best place is. You were uniquely designed to come up with something amazing, and you've got to find it and stay there. This is the weird thing. Companies get started early. They have some relationships. They get an opportunity. They get a luck. And maybe they get 2 or 3 slots with a large prime contractor. They can add more to it. What they're really trying to do is get enough positions filled so that the person that's the best at sales can not be on billable work anymore, but go back and do all the marketing and, get more work in. What that takes is a pipeline methodology, a list of what you're going after, when those are going to end, what the contract values are, how you're going to get it, who else is on the team. And companies that are good at this really have an art, and it can always be improved. Getting a pipeline, if you've got a 10% win rate and you can plug in whatever percent your win rate is, if it's 50%, that's fine. Whatever your win rate is, whatever you want to have an annual revenue, that's how many dollars you have to go over. If I want to have $2 million in annual revenue, I need 20 million in my pipeline. It's got to be real stuff, not fluff, or I'm not going to hit that target. You know this, and this is like, don't you want to play at the very top of the game? The other thing I added down here is that's 2 million in annual revenue, a 5-year contract of $10 million. So, this could be much bigger than that. You need to be looking at the pipeline, what the dates are, what the period of performance is. When you're first starting, it's going to be much simpler, but go sit in with somebody that knows how to do this, find out what it needs to look like, and just realize that starting off the bat or early on, you're going to go, Jenny, I'll never have any of this. I know that frustration because I feel it too, but you're going to learn. Beware the roller coaster. I've talked about this a little bit, the ups and downs of we won. Oh, now we're onboarding, using up all our cash, using up all our brain power. What the roller coaster means is you may start with subcontracting and you're constantly developing that relationship with that prime contractor to be their favorite sub. So they'll keep adding work to you. If you're not good at that, they're not going to keep adding work to you. Timing, you can't speed it up. As we were going through COVID, people were calling me, asking me for different things. And I said, well, what's your real goal? Well, we want 40% growth this year. 40% growth this year. What's in your pipeline? There's no way to declare it because the federal market is 18 to 24 month cycle. And if you don't know that your competitors are looking out 2 to 4 years, you're not in the same game they are, and they're going to be way ahead of you. You're not going to be able to catch it up. One of the things that is so hard in federal contracting is when there is a slowdown, then it is very hard to get back up to the level you were. Everything is tied to it. Financing payroll with billings is the traditional market for how we finance in federal contracting. Big companies have no problem with this. They've got all the lines of credit they need. But most small businesses, when they need a line of credit, have to go back to the bank, say, hey, we just want a big contract. Can you increase our line of credit? And they're going to ask, how much is your revenue going up and when? Provide me a projection. I'll take it to the board. We'll see what we can do. So any blip makes them crazy. Steady growth is another super important point. You don't have to be growing 10, 15% a year. You may be happy at a steady 8 or 10% per year and growing instead of going on this roller coaster, because what happens, you go on the roller coaster, you have a loss that was completely unexpected. And it's like, well, I didn't hit a home run. So who's up? How are we going to get another home run by the 7th inning? I don't know. Teaming and priming. Yes. After you go through the subcontracting phase, you're going to be looking at teaming and how to become a prime, but you've got to develop those relationships. And just like online dating, you can't just call people up and say, hey, let's have lunch. Can we get married? I tried that. It didn't work. No, I'm kidding. So anyway, teaming and priming is about developing long-term relationships, and they take a lot of meetings to do. And how many times are you going to go to lunch with people? How are you truly going to find who you want to do business with and how to qualify them? I had somebody call me and say, well, we really would like a hub zone or 8A that's early and, hungry. And we're a woman-owned small business and we know how to put out proposals. And Sure, I'm sure that was a great strategy, but it's like, this isn't like, going to Publix and getting groceries. This is something different. You have to define why somebody would want to team with you before you go and say, let's go find them. What do you bring to the table so you can explain your role in it? Replacement is so important to make sure that as contracts are ending, you've got some replacement business. It's also really important to have a plan for steady growth. And that means a lot of long range planning, 2 to 4 years out at a minimum as you're doing this. Growth takes cash. Johnny Cash. I like him, the man in black. So for a small business, cash has to come out of your profit. It's got to be your cash. Nobody's going to walk up and say, hey, cool, I see you have a federal contract. I think I should loan you a bunch of money. They will if you have a federal contract, but you're still either doing the work or chasing the work when you're early on in startup mode. Nobody's loaning you money. You're going to not pay yourself. You're going to kind of use savings, different things like that. So what's your plan for that? Because there's not grants for it, sadly. I wish there were. Some people are doing different ways. The only thing you can do is go to SBA. You could go to get it SBIR. But what I've been told about getting the SBA loans is your local bank, if you have the right relationship, would loan against that as well. So maybe you don't want to go do all that. The whole thing is the trade-off of paperwork versus getting stuff done. Traction. Traction to me is the second stage of government contracting, where you've got some work coming in. Because you have work coming in, you can afford to spend more on business development and recruiting and systems, which you have to do because your company grows. This is a constant thing that you have to invest in every single year. And you think, great, we put in an accounting system. Well, super. Guess what? Within 2 years, you might grow so much that you've got to do more or add more to it. The toughest part about it is figuring out what systems that you want to have and how to make them talk to each other. Because if your business developers need information and you can't provide it regularly, you're going to miss out on things that you want to be able to do. Stage 3, I call it growth. That's the point at which your systems are set up. You've got the processes, you've got your team, you're rolling. So you start going after prime contracts or targeting them at least. Somebody says, go get some IDIQs, get on GSA, get some GWACs. You're doing all those things because you went and talked to a specific agency where you want to do more work. And they said, go get a GSA schedule. You go get a GSA schedule. You come back and you said, well, I got a GSA schedule. Well, we're not using that anymore. So go get on this IDIQ. Cost money, cost your cash. Now, by the time you get up to a certain point, yes, you'll have a line of credit. Won't be that big a deal. Acceleration is because you got all those GWACs and IDIQs, you're on GSA and you got a bunch of prime contracts. You built up not just a pipeline as you're thinking, like a pipe dream. And the backlog is the contracts that you've won that you're going to be able to eat off for the next several years. And you take that contract backlog and you start getting efficient because you're no longer expending all your energy in the things you were doing early on. You're now able to do this. And this is not that much different from being a top athlete. If you were a runner, first you had to get to where you were using the right form and you started doing it on a regular basis. You didn't just run by the gym. You went and worked out, got your overall fitness up, and you kept going. Traction is where, you know what? I'm going to do some 5Ks. I'm going to do some 10Ks. And I think over time, I can probably get a little further. You stuck to it. Growth is where you set yourself some larger goals, like I'm doing 2 marathons a year or one, whatever it is. Acceleration is where you truly want to compete. And the way to compete is to make sure you're being very efficient about it. Performance is where a company that has gotten a significant backlog really creates a diversification of their portfolio. They are no longer with 2 key competencies and 3 agencies. They've got a number of key competencies and a number of agencies: cybersecurity, hypersonics, working with Missile Defense Agency, doing a certain amount of stuff, OCONUS, all of those different things that you can do when you get to be a good sized company and you've got teams that can go after that and you know where you're going. Mid-tier is, of course, that graduation when you're out of small business, you're on full and open competition. And then the last thing is obviously large primes. The main reason I'm bringing these up is because what stage are you? When you're thinking about what stage you are and you're talking to a mid-tier and they're giving you all this advice, you got to stop and ask yourself, does that really apply to me? Okay, so now let's talk about growth. But before I do that, we're going to have poll time. Oh my gosh, here he is. Daniel is in his crane position right at the end of the movie. And you're looking at it and you're saying, Daniel, I think you can do it. Now he's been, kicked a couple times. They've disqualified the other member that kicked him in the knee. The guy he's fighting is his arch nemesis and has already, done some dirty tricks. And he's injured one of his knees. He can't even put any weight on, and he's doing the crane position. You know why it works for him? Because he practiced 1 or 2 or 3 key skills, mastering the fundamentals, so that when he needed it, it would be muscle memory. That is exactly what we're talking about. Going off and doing all these different things until you've got this mastery is not going to allow Daniel to compete at a higher level. The only reason he was able to come up as quickly as he was when he met Mr. Miyagi, and it's only, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks later, he's in a regional competition, the All Valley competition, is because he practiced fundamentals and got those skills. So anyway, what business type are you? What we're asking about is, are you a manufacturer? Are you doing products and reselling? Are you doing construction? Are you doing services? Are you IT services? Are you professional services? What are your areas? Our question on the poll isn't asking that much, but each one of those is a slightly different pricing strategy. Some of the rules will apply with variation, but this presentation is mainly geared to companies that are doing professional IT services, also called butts and seats. The thing that gets me, and the reason I'm doing this presentation is because I can't tell you how many times people call me and go, oh my gosh, how did we lose this one? And here he is, Gordon, saying, is anybody paying any attention? I'm telling you what to do. And just like you as the executive of your company, you're talking to your team, you're saying what we need to do. They're listening, they're doing their best, but how do you lead them more effectively so you don't have this loss again? You only lost by a few points. You are totally locked down on the technical. What are other people doing that you're not? You're looking for the secret formula. When can you add business development? What do you do about it? You know how crushing it is to lose a contract. You've been waiting. You've been waiting for months. You've been waiting to make other decisions until you hear about this contract, yay or nay. You've been waiting to hear about this contract, and even when you won it, you're waiting to hear what's going to happen with the protest. You don't have control over these things, and you just feel so frustrated. You feel like a loser. You don't deserve that. The main problem is you played someone else's game. Okay, this was Tom Brady after a bad one. And luckily, Tampa Bay and the Bucs are doing pretty well as of when I'm recording this. I can't play the way that Tom Brady is. Could it be that I can't throw, that I have no particular athletic skills? It's probably also that I don't know that much about football. I can watch it, but I can't play it. So close your eyes, put yourself in the mind of a company that you aspire to be, a company that has had success in federal contracting and what they went through to get there. Set it in your mind. Pick how you want to see yourself in 3 years and make it reasonable what you want to achieve to get to where they've been, where they're on their 20-year path. Ask yourself, what is my game? Just want to throw in, everybody says, well, if only I was an 8A, or if only this, if only that. It's very frustrating, especially because we've all gone through this lowest price, technically acceptable LPTA world. And even though they will say, we want the best quality, it's not the price. Many times it is always the price. So you've got to really look close and ask yourself, what do you want? Because I can tell you as a financial person, I can ask you, what number do you want it to be? And I can get you there. I can show it to you and let you decide if you want to go after this. But here are the top 5 pricing tricks that others use to win. The first one is averaging the labor rates with new hires. Okay, when you're bidding by labor category, if you have resumes included, that's going to be a little bit harder to do, but it is not unusual for companies to bid by adding new hires that are at the lowest level of a labor category. So they drag the overall individual labor category billing rate down mathematically. They'll also do things like change around the number of hours associated with the different labor categories, knowing they're hardly going to use any of the most senior ones and a bunch of the most junior ones. Mathematics, that's all it is. It's tricks, but that's what they play. Glad to show you if you want to play that game. But the question is, I want to show you how to know what number you want it to be. They'll lose money in hopes of winning on the follow-on, or they'll go into it for the first and the second year knowing it's not going to cover their costs, with the concept that they're going to make it up as they get into the contract. One way they do that is they fire a lot of the people that are on there that are well paid, and they bring on cheaper people. That's called greening of the workforce. Underbidding the pay rates, big thing. A lot of times you're bidding on a contract where you know there's incumbents, and so you go find out what they make, even if you ask them and find out that this is what you need. Well, some companies will just say, well, you know, across the board, we're dropping that 5%. The other math trick that was used a long time ago that finally people caught on to is they put people on a 50-hour work week and pay them for 40 hours. So all of those things, math tricks, sometimes you can get away with them, sometimes you can't. But is that really where you want to be? Cutting your profit to land a new agency relationship. If it's that important to you, yes, you should do it, because you're never going to get in there otherwise. But make sure you're not setting yourself up for a long-term fall. And the other thing is, when you cut your pay rates, when you cut your fringe, your overhead, your G&A, or your profit, whatever you're doing, odds are it's really coming out of your profit. The only time it's not working that way is when you're doing cost reimbursable or cost plus contracting. Most of the people that are on this call are not necessarily doing that, but even in that scenario, you're still having to manage your other contracts. The biggest thing that I've seen that really hurts me over the last few years is seeing teaming agreements, subcontracting. We won. They never called us. We never got any work. We put in that proposal. We were the key people that wrote that section. We never got anything, or worse yet, the subcontractor just sent us a thing and said, well, here's what we're paying you. It's tough. Right, Judge Judy? Is it worth it? I don't think so. Price is always the weakest link to a customer, just like in business, just like in any kind of business. Price is the weakest link. If you want to run, something where you're always the thrift store and you never make any money, fine. Follow the race to the bottom. Work with customers that complain constantly. Know that it's really unsustainable. Find out that your monthly billings don't cover your payroll cost. Ask yourself, are you mortgaging your future? Just like when I go out and spend a bunch of money on my credit card, getting stuff, and then I get home and think, I spent it all. I can't shop anymore. So sometimes I take it all back and, start over. It was fun to shop. Retail therapy. Price is the weakest link. This is a race to the bottom, and I use Battleship because think about the game of Battleship. If you close your eyes and think about it, you've got to figure out what your weapons are, where you are, what your opponent has, where they are. And you're always trying to do this, with the seas moving, there's a lot of noise, there's jets, you can't crash into anything. You want to make sure that you know where the subs and the torpedoes are too. So price is the weakest link. So Battleship can sometimes be a race to the bottom. So think about something besides price that makes your customer say, that's the team we want. Price is the weakest link is because the customer complains constantly. Think about it. When all of those contracts were won as lowest price technically acceptable, and the employees that were hired showed up to work with high turnover and they didn't have the skills. They were basically just there to fill a seat, fill a slot. Customer complains constantly. The other thing is you go out to recruit more people like that and you can't get them because nobody wants to work that low a pay rate. Well, I call this Clue. So Clue is just like that. You have a lot of unknowns in federal contracting. You don't always know a lot about what the customer is really looking for. You've got other people trying to get there first. You've got your weapon, but is somebody else going to do it? Is this like rock, paper, scissors? Where do you want to be? What kills me is thinking about people doing bids that are average rate for the entire United States, which is fine if the work is in, pretty reasonable state like Texas or Kentucky or something like that. If you get work in Washington State, California, Hawaii, New Jersey, you're going to hurt bad. Price is the weakest link. I use the game of life because it's all a balancing act. So think about it at home. Something happened, hurricane, your roof's got to be replaced. It was supposed to be $12,000. The insurance is only going to cover $6,500. So you got to come up with the other part. Now, that's a surprise. And we don't want to do things that cause surprise because we also want to make sure that we can always cover our monthly cost at home. And the same thing's true for our business. Number one thing, got to cover payroll. But you also want to have enough cash flow, enough profit so you can weather that storm. Price is the weakest link because price is unsustainable. You can win one or two, you can get some work, and maybe that's what you want to do. But just like this game of Risk, you've got to be thinking where you're going and where you want to go. And are you going to be in trouble because you didn't think that you put all of your forces in going after one of these objectives, and it ended up meaning that you don't have what you need to succeed in the other areas? Price is the weakest link. The last thing is, are you mortgaging your future? Now, I probably shouldn't play as much Monopoly as I did growing up because I think it changed how I think about money. It's almost like I think it's like play money, but it's your real money. And there's a lot that you don't have control over on this board. I wasn't very good at Monopoly until my older brother just kind of got bored and he said, well, I'm going to show you how to play. That's my goal. I want to show you how to play so you can be a competitor. Okay, poll time. This is number 3 poll. Jimmy Fallon, my fave, is asking, are you a prime contractor? Are you a subcontractor? Do you do both prime and sub, or do you not have any yet? This is really just to put in perspective, what's the right thing for you? Because the answer I give, depending on your answer to that, is going to be different for you. And that's what I mean. Play your own game, understand what stage you're in. It's time to get back to math class. I'm going to go ahead and taught you a little bit about definitions so that you can go back to your office and think about, do I understand this? And does our team speak the same language? Because frequently you'll find they don't. Direct labor is your employees. It's not subcontractors. It's not consultants. By the way, there is no such thing as a 1099 employee. Please remove that from your vocabulary. You're going to get in trouble with the IRS. A 1099 is an independent consultant. Direct labor is the hourly pay rate. Remember, we started with 100,000. I said divided by 2,080 hours. Give me the hourly pay rate. The base calculation here, want to let you know it's going to consider productive hours, like 1880 hours, which is excluding about 200 hours of leave. I come up with 200 hours by this: 80 hours holiday and 120 hours of paid time off or annual leave. You got to also consider sometimes there's required state rules about sick leave. There's also some current executive orders about sick leave. So find out what that number is, because it's going to vary a little bit inside the proposal. You want to take a close look at that. You want to consider the specific employees that meet the labor category. You want to estimate some salary for new hires, and you want to have a mix of both specific employees and projected new hires. And honestly, take a look at how you mix it up and how the averages are done, because that is a math trick you can use. Fringe benefits. What is fringe benefit? Payroll taxes is the number one. That's going to be about 10% for FICA, which is Social Security and Medicare, FUTA, federal unemployment, SUTA, state unemployment, and different states have different rates. If you're in some high cost states, you definitely want to take a look at that. It's not going to have a huge impact because it's still going to be about 10% overall for payroll taxes. I usually include workers' comp in that percentage because once you get over a certain number of employees, you're going to have workers' comp. Leave, I've already talked about. Group insurance, 401k matching, those type of things are the other. And you want to make sure that your fringe benefit package is rich enough to attract people, but not so expensive that you can't win. That's where you need people that can help you that are experts in benefits plans. Overhead. I always use this overhead thing because it's kind of like all of us went out to lunch. There's 6 of us. And there I am at the right-hand corner, kind of off by myself because you guys think I'm paying the tab. So comes time to order. And, I order water and a salad. And the guy across from me orders dessert and he's getting a steak and he's getting all the extra stuff on it. Several of the other people are just getting the daily special because they're just regular people. They don't think they're anything special and they're not that hungry. Somebody else just gets a club sandwich. Those are all things. But what happens at the end? When it's time to split the bill, splitting the bill is like overhead. Who is going to pay for overhead? Because that's a shared cost. Now, the guy that's sitting across that ordered all the extra stuff, he wants me to pay his share. And so what you want to do is take a look at what are you paying for recruiting? What does it take for certifications? What are you doing for training and professional development? What do you have to do for a facility security officer? What about computers and software? And facilities costs, depending on whether they're working inside your building or they're working at a client site. These are all important because overhead is a shared cost. And as companies grow, you want to make sure that you're not averaging in everybody else's cost when they're not similar. And that's where people start creating on-site and off-site overhead, or they'll start creating, cybersecurity overhead versus the other. It can make a huge difference in your pricing. Let me just tell you a quick story. Many years ago, I went to visit a company and they wanted some help with pricing. I walked into their facility and met everybody, walked around, and I realized what the problem was immediately. And they probably knew what it was, but they couldn't define it. And they certainly couldn't have a conversation about it. They had a bunch of very senior civil engineers that did highway construction and bridges. Very high professional liability insurance, high credential, very expensive people. Then they had a bunch of young guys and gals in a separate building in its own room. There were curtains. I could only go up to the front of the building. I couldn't go inside the building. They were cartographers and they were trained cartographers straight out of school. Their job was to take and make maps. And what was going on is their overhead was being averaged with the bridge builders. They couldn't win anything because the bridge builder guys were the guy at the corner that ordered all the dessert and fixing. Nothing wrong with him, but we got to make sure everybody pays their fair share. General administrative is your corporate expense. Corporate expenses are accounting, human resources, executives. There's always some gray areas about where people put this. And you will hear from one company, this is the only way to do it. It's never the only way to do it. It's your company policy and how you do it. On the other hand, as the company grows, you may adjust how things are classified, but this is the general description of general administrative or G&A, which is corporate expense or headquarter expense. These are the expenses that go on, even if you don't have any work, which would be sad. It's also accounting software and training, implementation cost, the cost of buying the timesheet software, the annual cost of some of the licensed software that you use to do your business development and research, bank fees, legal fees, professional fees, property taxes, and state income taxes. Those could all be in G&A. That's not always the way it is. I'm giving a simple overview of everybody. But you can see here he is walking around on a spreadsheet trying to figure it out. And it's just like sorting anything else. If you go into the kitchen, you're going to put some stuff in the freezer, you're going to put some stuff in the fridge, and you're going to put some in the pantry. And then you're going to put the stuff that you like for yourself up on the special shelf. So Those are the cookies for me. Whatever it turns out to be, just make sure that you start to understand what these different classifications mean. Profit. In government contracting, they call it fee. The profit percent can depend on the contract type and risk. People always ask me, you mean in federal contracting, I should only look at 6 to 8% profit? Yes. Yes. That's kind of the going rate. And if people are willing to accept that, then that is the going rate. If you go in there and try to bid 15%, you're not going to get it. People go into government contracting for different reasons. A lot of the reason they do is because they understand the business, or they are particularly tied to serving particular agencies, or it's part of their kind of their mission or what they love doing. It could also be that they recognize that success in federal contracting, when you get to a certain level, means that you win really big contracts, $billion contracts, and you're willing to take a lot of risk early on because you'll know you'll be able to do that. Like a lot of serial entrepreneurs will sell their company and go back in. Are you at that level that you want to be able to do that? Good question. Primes will always pressure you to accept lower profit rates. And you've been on these meetings where they said, well, we went real skinny on this pricing. So, we're hoping that you can go down to 5% too. And you got to know what your rates are to be able to figure out whether you're taking 5% or 3% profit. You want to be cooperative with your prime contractors, but you also need to be able to make a quick decision and a clear decision so that they can get on and can get that proposal out on time. I would consider lowering my profit rates if I'm trying to get new relationships or break in a new market. You might end up getting the jobs that you get on when the work share comes in may not be may not be the most profitable labor category. So it's really important. Okay. What I'm telling you is you've got to find out what your secret sauce is. What do you want to be? Everybody's got their own favorite barbecue sauce, whether it's Texas style, North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, Florida, all kinds, right? What you want to do is decide what is your secret sauce. What is your secret sauce of your company, the company culture, the people you bring on, the stuff you go after? What are you passionate about? What makes a difference? And plan to be a top competitor. Determine what that needs to be, and your entire company and organization needs to support that. From a financing standpoint, is once you decide what that wants to be, we can create the financial model that supports you in that. You'll be taking into account the pay rates of the employee you're bidding and new hires. It's going to be a lot different if you're hiring a lot of hourly rate workers that maybe make $15 an hour, or you're going to hire a bunch of database analysts, $115,000 a year. You've got to have your average labor rates and salary ranges, know what those are, know what parts of the country, and know what part of the country you think you'll be doing work in if you're going to be doing that. You've got to prove the source of your pay rates and the escalation. A lot of times when they check out your proposal, which they don't always look at, is going to say, where'd you come up with this? How did you get salary surveys? What'd you use for escalation? Or you may have to describe that in your proposal or cross volume. The last thing I want to tell you is proposal templates. There are a lot of different proposal templates. There's a lot of different formulas. Now, it's confusing when you're not a cost accounting type person or a pricing person. It will change as your company grows. What I'm showing you here are the basic ways to do it, but there's still some things. So it's almost like the difference between, the basic things for a barbecue sauce are probably tomato sauce, mustard, and vinegar. But beyond that, what do you put in there to spice it up? What makes each one of these the best? So my methodology, I call it my RPM, or rate and pricing model. The reason that I created this is because I feel like I want more people that are in federal contracting to understand the math, because there are classes at certain universities that are specific to government contracting. You'd have to go sit in on those for a while and get an understanding. This rate and pricing model is something I've developed over years by answering the same question over and over different ways. And I've got a bunch of different versions of this, but let me go ahead and we're going to go to my rate and pricing model. So give me a minute and let me switch the screen. Okay. The one that I'm showing right now, I call it the direct labor multiplier. There's also a term called wrap rate, and wrap rate usually is a billing rate, but be listening in the meeting for what people are talking about. This was already in the presentation where I took $1 worth of direct labor and said 30% fringe, 5% overhead, 17%. I come 8% for fee, and I come up with this magic 1.7. The intention of this little math calculation is so you could change the fringe and say, well, maybe ours is only 25%. Maybe our overhead is 2%. Maybe our G&A is 24%, which is high. Anything over 15% is high. You just have to get a handle on it. I could go lower on G&A. I could make it 12%. That's going to drop my profit, because if you aren't getting your full rate, it's coming out of profit. A lot of people don't want to hear that. The next thing, I call this my wrap rate calculator. Mathematically, it's the same thing, but instead of this $1, I'm using $50 as the pay rate. So 50 times 71.7 is 85.29. If I need to do it the other way, and that's why I put those formulas in earlier, so you could do it backwards and forwards, a factor or derivative, whatever you want to call it. If I know my bill rate is 85.29 and my multiplier is 1.7, I can pay the person $50 an hour in order to meet my established goals. Top line proposal estimate, I told you I'd do something with this. Again, there are variations, and what you want to do is learn how to build these. And it's not easy. It took me a good while to do this. And but you want to learn how to do it and create these inside your company. When you go into a big company, they've got models that have been developed over years. Everybody uses that model, but you just walked in, you started your company, you've been using it for a while, but now what you want to do is be able to understand what it is. You've been able to get along with it, but now you want to understand the why. So all this means is if I said I'm instead of 20 people, I'm going to 30, I just said, and they're all making an average pay rate of $50 an hour, I just changed everything. Well, what would happen if I went down here instead of 30, I say it's still 30 people, but what if my indirect rate for fringe was 25% instead of 30%? How does that change what I do? Or 26%. Got it? The biggest part of this, though, is how you actually come up with your indirect rates. Your indirect rates are actually calculated from your income statement, your monthly profit and loss, and your budget or forecast. It really only matters where your indirect rates are going to be by the end of the year, because honestly, when you're doing pricing activity, you price the same rate for the whole year. At larger companies, they talk about forward pricing rates. Well, the Boeing company probably has quarterly or monthly forward pricing rates, depending on where they're putting things in, because they have agreements with Defense Contract Audit Agency and Defense Contract Management Agency. This is how we're going to do it. As a small business, you are much less likely to have what's called forward pricing rates, although you'll be in a meeting and somebody will start talking about, what are your forward pricing rates, man? You don't know, because you don't do it exactly that way. Most companies that are small will have, here's what our rate is for this year. And my recommendation is to figure out what your rate needs to be over a period of time and always make it so you hit those same rates. Just like when they decide, when somebody goes in to buy a franchise, and they could get Seattle coffee, or they could get Dunkin' Donuts, or they could get Starbucks. Those are three totally different pricing models. So ask yourself, and this goes back to, what do you want to do? What's your exit strategy? Ask yourself what you want to be. And you set yourself, you line yourself up so your pricing supports that. You don't bid where you are today for contracts you're going to not actually start on in 2 years. You want to do a forecast of what your company is going to look like in 2 years. You want to get so good at calculating these rates that you have an easy way to project them all along. And what you really are doing is you set the rates and you steer to them. They will change. There'll be times where things change because you're adding new divisions, but this is the key to it all. The last thing I want to show you is what I call labor category billing rates. You see this type of stuff on proposals all the time. And I usually have some kind of report set up that'll list everybody in the company. I keep it all the time. I might even have it spread month by month so I can see what it is, so that anytime I make a change, Sorry, Davidson, I got to cut your pay a little bit. Um, we can make a change here, and we'll know what the impact is. So those are basically the spreadsheets that I work with. And there's so many different variations. If you go talk to somebody that's doing your pricing, you will definitely see other methods that they are using. And it doesn't matter. You just need to be consistent about it and know really how it's doing. But we covered all of those spreadsheets. So now we're ready for me to wrap it up. I'm so excited. I'm so glad you spent the time with me here today to learn about it. But let's just kind of review. We talked about how crushing it is to lose a contract because, it'll set you back. It's a big disappointment. And you got to get up, back up and play the next day. Just think about how Tom Brady felt when he lost that game, made him look bad, messed up his average. Anyway, but you know how crushing it is to lose a contract. Well, what really did happen? Let's ask ourselves what happened. What were the things that went in? What did we have control over? What did we not have control over, right? You lost by a few points. You're asking yourself what other people are doing. You're still looking for the secret formula. And the other thing is, no matter what happens, you still need to hire another business developer. What are you going to do about it? Were you playing somebody else's game? Did you ask for a debrief? The debrief is going to be the thing that helps you the most to know where you want to go and adjust, learn from it, take that experience and figure it out. Just like in the military, when they're doing aircraft carrier landings, every single pilot gets rated every single time on that because their goal is to improve it. And they'll have debriefings afterwards to discuss all of those elements because you've got to be able to play at the top of your game. If you're landing on an aircraft carrier, or if you want to be number one as a market leader as a small business in federal contracting. You want to know your own game. I talked a few minutes ago about the different 7 stages of federal contracting. I call this the GovCon small business growth model. These are the areas of focus that I like to talk to people about because startup is different than going after traction. Traction is building off your current relationships. Growth is either you're going after new capabilities, with current customers because they already know you. Acceleration, you're going a little bit further. Performance is diversification. So it's all different. It takes different level of investment. It takes different teams. And I think the toughest part about it is companies will outgrow some of the people that were on their team early on. And you've got to be willing to let that go and in order to grow. And you'll see that happen again and again with your success. My recommendation is find yourself a group brain. A group brain to me is people that I can talk to on a regular basis that I could, ring them. I could send them an email. I could send them a text. I might send a group email and say, what is everybody's opinion? I'll get 10 different opinions, but then I want to weigh that. What you're looking for is how do you get access to resources and relationships so you can turn that into revenue? That's what I call a group brain. Now, I call myself the Oprah of federal contracting because really, I've seen this happen so many times. I've seen the ones that succeed and the ones that fail. And my goal is to make sure that more small businesses in federal contracting succeed because we're wasting a lot of resource. Where do you find answers? What I'm looking at is the whole idea of having a group that I call Mitch, which stands for mentorship, inclusion, teamwork, camaraderie, and heart. It's all about building relationships in GovCon. I don't need to know every single person along this grid. I just need to know how to get through that path. And just like so many of the people that I've been working with over the years, maybe they served with somebody in the military, there's a level of trust that already exists there. And they're willing to make connections. They're willing to answer questions. They're willing to help everybody in the community get better at what we're doing. Those are the type of people that I enjoy working with and that I can help the most because it's a team effort. So thank you so much for listening today. I'm Jenny Clark with Solvability. Every Friday, I host something called Freedom Friday. You can just go to solvability.com, Freedom Friday at 30 minutes, 1300 to 1330 Eastern time. And what I do is I bring different people that are subject matter experts in federal contracting or entrepreneurs talk about some of the issues that impact us all. So after this event, you'll get a copy of the Small Business Growth Model, copy of this presentation. If you'd like to reach out to me, the best place to go is on LinkedIn. Just type in Jenny W. Clark or go Google Jenny W. Clark Solvability. Please connect with me. I will invite you to our LinkedIn group called GovCon Summit Small Business Community, and stay in touch, because I really believe that there are different companies at different levels. I want to group them so that I can offer what you really want to do to succeed, and then help foster that growth. Because, this is a national treasure, national asset. Every time I see an entrepreneur succeed in federal contracting, I think of the families that were served by them being willing to take all this on. So thank you so much.